Good morning, everybody. It is Sunday, the 28th of February, 2021, the penultimate day of February and on to March. And I hope your Sunday is off to a great start. Having reviewed and looked very carefully many times at the video footage taken from a smartphone on the dash RichLife's vehicle last night, I have a few thoughts that crossed my mind, and I wanted to share them with you today because there seems to be things that weigh on both sides of the equation. Let me tell you, for my part, what I decided to do within 2021 and late 2020 was I judged that the roadways out there, especially the interstates, had become much more dangerous. I noticed with the onset of the pandemic that highway speeds had nudged up from 75 to 80 to now 80 to 90 miles an hour on some of these roads. And the time for reaction if something happens is very, very short. And I've seen some bad wrecks, the results of wind and driver error, most recently on Interstate 5 coming north when a tractor, a semi flipped over and totally blocked a northbound lane of Interstate 5. It was pretty rugged scene out there. So I decided to cease live streaming on highways because of the increase in the speed and the need to have even faster reaction times. And I'm no spring chicken, but I don't know if I'd have the reaction times that I had as a 20-year-old, but it can result in some highly dangerous situations. And I also decided not to interact with, not to be in a position where I would interact with side chats. And even in my later days of live streaming on highways, I was telling my moderators to tell people that I can't interact with the chat because I'm on a highway. But I think setting up a live stream and just not interacting and keeping your eyes on the road is probably okay. It's not the most desirable thing in the world, but I think as long as you're focused on the road and not engaged in the side chat, it's probably okay. And it probably gives you some measure of protection too against some of the tomfoolery that happened last night. In looking at that, I don't even want to call it an accident because part of me in reviewing that, I was thinking to myself, there's so many elements of this that add up to a possible, almost intentional act of pulling out in front of somebody. Just the coincidental aspects of that make that so strange that somebody would come in on the high speed side of a freeway and not pick the first lane, but purposely position themselves in the middle lane. It's quite strange to me. I mean, you would hope that nobody was watching that and timing that to pull out and willing to sacrifice a vehicle to make that a reality. Well, let's put that aside and let's say that it was unintentional, which was probably the case. Now, you consider the car that was moving the other direction, the cheap Cherokee, was coming southbound on I-75 around Richmond, Kentucky. And we can theorize a couple things happen. Most likely in my mind is the person may have been inebriated. It was Saturday night early into Sunday morning. And possibly the person missed the exit that they wanted to take going southbound and took the very first opportunity to find any cut through to get themselves in a northbound position on I-75 to find the proper exit. Well, there's a couple things in that scenario that were not properly done. Number one, if you're going to cross a median strip on an interstate highway, almost inevitably those turnarounds are restricted to service vehicles and emergency vehicles only, and they're posted as such. Does that mean I haven't seen people use the turnarounds? Yes, I've seen them use it before, but it results in a very dangerous situation whereupon you decide to make that turn. You have to de-accelerate in the fastest lane on that interstate, the innermost lane, and move across a gravel strip there, and then go into the turn area. Then once you do that turn, you have to once again enter the highway, not on the preferred side of the low speed merge area, the traditional on ramps of a highway, but you're coming right into the high speed inner lane, which, let's face it, high speed means little time to react. The crossing of that median, unless you're a service vehicle or an emergency vehicle, is an illegal activity that can get you a fine for sure. Had the person still insisted on doing that crossing, they could have at least initially put the flashers on, okay, done their turn, kept their flashers on to signify that they're in a slowdown or something to be aware of, and accelerate and stay in the fast lane, keeping the flashers on until they achieve the highway speed of 65, 70 miles an hour. None of that was done last night. There was an illegal turn that was made. There was no warning to other drivers. And the expectation of somebody coming on northbound on 75, even if somebody crossed and came across the median strip crossing area, would be that that person would be apt to stick in the high-speed lane, the inner lane. But this person actually went ahead in their Jeep and crossed into the center lane with no further indication that they were going to go over to the slower lane. No flashers, nothing to indicate, on a very dark road with very limited visibility. Very difficult to see something like that. And at 70 miles an hour, the road comes up awful, awful fast. Let me also say this in terms of further compounding what was already a pretty boneheaded move of crossing the median, not putting on flashers, choosing to move out of the closest lane before getting up to speed and positioning yourself. Obviously, that person must have looked in a rearview mirror and seen headlights coming up behind, which also baffles me from that point of view. But I think the cardinal thing in that situation is that Jeep, judging by the look of Chris's van and the damage that was done to the front end, looks like it's going to be a total to me because of the front drive and all the alignment problems that will be present in axles and drive shafts and things like that. Probably going to be a write-off, but you can't tell me upon that impact that there was not also significant damage to the rear quarter of that Jeep Cherokee. At that moment in time, that person's duty, because that person does not know what the person behind them, what their fate was going to be upon impact. And it's really quite fortunate that Chris did not oversteer and managed to avoid flipping that van, which could have very well likely happened. And meanwhile, the person in the Jeep Cherokee is jetting off into the night, oblivious, scared, or determined to just make a getaway. Well, I'll tell you that. That's a Class A misdemeanor in Kentucky, and had any injury occurred, which still remains to be seen due to back pains and other issues that Chris is experiencing today, then it advances to a felony. And when you leave the scene of an accident in Kentucky, you're immediately liable for a 6-month suspension of your driver's license. Well, it may or may not matter to the person that engaged in all of that shenanigans on that highway. The most important takeaway from me is, obviously, and hopefully nobody was seriously injured in that, But there's a couple lessons to take away from that, especially in pandemic times. And something I've complained about for a year is people just going crazy on the roadways, whether it's in the neighborhood here doing 80, 90 miles an hour down streets, or people doing 90, 100 miles an hour on highways. The danger factor, I believe, has gone up tremendously due to the decreased patrols that I've noticed on highways. And at high speed, the margin of safety for controlling your vehicle has been reduced dramatically. It also points out the fact why you really also, as I said, need those total eyes concentration on the road. Yeah, you can live stream, just set your camera up and just let it roll. It also gives you some measure of protection, as I said, but I don't think engaging people on the side chat is going to do anything to enhance your safety, that's for sure, and certainly can slow down your reaction time to some dimwit that comes on the highway and does something like that. But certainly I hold the other person a lot at fault for doing something that in the course of normal driving would be an event that is prepared for in law by prohibiting things like turning through service entrances and not using your flashers until you get up to speed, and staying in your lane until you get your speed up to such a point that it matches the highway. And then the cardinal sin in my mind is taking off and leaving the scene of an accident, not knowing if the person that hit you has flipped over, gone off the road, or terribly injured themselves. To me, that is unforgivable. Just my thoughts on the Saturday morning. Your comments are welcome down below. Thumbs up are appreciated, and have a wonderful day.